In the city of Kaduna, there lived a very rich man called Mr. Otim and his beautiful wife Liza. Their house was so big that it looked like a hotel. There were many cars in the compound and workers always running around doing things. But inside that big house, there was something missing: peace. They had only one child, a little girl named Ngozi, who was 12 years old. She was kind, quiet, and always wished her parents could sit together and laugh like other families did. Every morning, Mr. Otim would leave early for work. He was a big businessman. Liza stayed home, but she was always busy on her phone or watching television. When they met, they often quarreled. They shouted, argued, and blamed each other. Sometimes their voices were so loud that even the housemaids became afraid. Poor Ngozi would sit on her bed and cover her ears. She did not like to hear her parents fighting. She wanted them to talk softly, to eat together, or to take her out to play. But that never happened. At school, her friends told stories about how their parents helped them with homework or went to church together. Ngozi only smiled and said nothing. At home, her mother gave her anything she asked for: new clothes, a phone, toys and sweet things, but still, her heart felt empty. Her father bought her a bicycle and even a piano, but he was never there to watch her play. Every night, Ngozi sat alone by her window, looking at the moon. She whispered, "I wish my parents could stop fighting. I just want them to love me again." Sometimes tears rolled down her cheeks. She didn't understand why rich people could be so sad. The more her parents got busy, the more she felt alone. Days turned into weeks, and the house that looked so beautiful on the outside began to feel cold inside. Then one evening, as December came close, Liza told Mr. Otim, "We need a break. Let's go to our other house in the mountains for Christmas." Mr. Otim agreed, but even then he sounded tired. He didn't smile. Liza didn't smile either. Only little Ngozi felt a small spark of hope in her heart. Maybe, just maybe, if they all went away together, they could find peace again. That night, Ngozi lay in her bed and whispered, "Maybe the mountains will make them love again." She closed her eyes slowly, not knowing that this trip would change her life forever. On the 22nd, the morning sun in Kaduna shone softly through the big glass windows. Birds sang on the trees outside. Inside the Otim mansion, everyone was busy getting ready for the journey. Mr. Otim told the driver to pack the car. Liza was arranging her expensive bags, perfumes, and makeup. The housemaids ran up and down carrying food boxes and clothes. And little Ngozi, with her small backpack, waited quietly at the corner. She was happy they were finally going somewhere together, even if her parents were not smiling. By 10 o'clock, everything was ready. The black Jeep stood shining in the sun. Mr. Otim wore dark glasses and held his phone as usual. Liza sat beside him, still scrolling through her messages. Ngozi sat alone at the back seat, hugging her teddy bear tightly. The road to Bagala Hills was long but very beautiful. Tall green trees stood on both sides and cool wind blew through the windows. Sometimes Ngozi would smile as she saw monkeys jumping from tree to tree and little birds flying together like a family. She wished her parents could see how lovely it all was, but inside the car there was no laughter. No one talked much, only the sound of the engine and the phone ringing from time to time. After some hours they began climbing higher and higher into the mountain area. The air became cold and fresh. Finally they reached their luxurious house on top of the hill, a big, shining white house with a view of the green forest below. From the balcony you could see the sun shining on the trees like gold. When they entered the house, Liza went straight to her room to rest. Mr. Otim sat on the sofa, already making calls about his work. The workers unpacked their things and arranged the rooms neatly. But soon the old problem returned. Liza came out asking why he was still on the phone. Mr. Otim shouted that she never understood him, and the quarreling began again, louder and louder. Little Ngozi sat in her room, covering her ears. Her heart felt heavy again. She thought this trip was supposed to bring peace, but it only brought the same noise. That night she didn't eat much. She sat by her window, looking down at the quiet forest. The wind blew softly through the trees. It looked peaceful there, far away from shouting and noise. Then a small idea came into her mind. She whispered to herself, "Maybe I should go and see what is down there." Maybe the wild is more peaceful than home. She looked at her sleeping bag, her teddy, and the forest lights in the distance. Her heart started beating fast. She didn't know that this small thought would soon become a big adventure, one she would never forget. The night was very quiet on Bogala Hills. The moonlight touched the roof of their house, and the forest below looked like a sleeping sea of trees. Inside her room, Ngozi sat on her bed with her teddy beside her. She could still hear her parents arguing softly in the sitting room, their voices rising and falling like waves. She wiped a tear from her cheek and whispered, "I am tired of this. I just want peace." Then a bold thought came into her mind. She picked up a paper from her school bag and wrote carefully, "Don't disturb me. I want to be alone." She folded the note and placed it right outside her bedroom door so that her parents could see it when they woke up. Ngozi looked around her room one last time. She wore her small shoes, carried her little backpack with a bottle of water, some biscuits, and her teddy bear. Then she waited quietly by the window until she was sure her parents had gone to sleep. When the house became silent, she slowly opened her door. Her heart was beating fast, thump, thump, thump. She walked down the hallway, careful not to make any sound. The house lights were dim, and only the sound of the wind could be heard outside. At the back of the house was a small gate that opened toward the forest path. Ngozi pushed it gently. It made a tiny creak sound, but she didn't stop. She stepped outside, and the cold night air touched her face. The forest looked dark but calm. The stars above were shining brightly like small lamps in the sky. She took a deep breath and said softly, "Here I come, new world." Step by step, she walked down the narrow path, her shoes touching dry leaves that made small crack sounds. She heard the cry of an owl far away, and sometimes the rustle of something moving in the grass. But she didn't turn back. She passed tall trees, strange flowers, and shining insects that looked like tiny lights. Her little heart was scared but brave. She didn't know where she was going, but she felt safer in the quiet forest than in her noisy home. As she went deeper, she saw small footprints on the ground, not like human ones. They were wider and looked strange. She stopped and whispered, "What kind of animals live here?" Still, she walked on. Hours passed. The moon moved behind the clouds. The forest became darker and colder. Ngozi felt sleepy, but she kept moving. By the time the first light of morning touched the trees on the 23rd, she was far, far away from home. She didn't know it, but she was now walking toward the unknown world of the Katoti, creatures no one had ever seen. Morning came softly over Bogala Hills. The sun peeked through the trees, painting the forest floor with golden light. Birds sang sweet songs, and the air smelled of wet leaves. Ngozi was tired, hungry, and her legs ached from walking all night. Still, she kept moving, pushing away big branches and brushing off tiny insects that landed on her arm. Her small backpack felt heavy now. She sat on a rock, took a sip of water, and looked around. Everything was strange. The trees were taller than any she had ever seen, and the forest felt alive, whispering to her. Somewhere in the distance, she heard a loud croaking sound, not from a frog, but something bigger. She stood up slowly and followed a narrow path covered in thick green moss. As she walked, she noticed footprints again, many of them deep in the soil, large, with long toes and marks like claws. Her heart began to beat faster. Suddenly, she stepped into a small open space surrounded by banana trees. At first, it looked empty, but then, movement. From behind the trees came figures. One by one, they appeared, watching her silently. They were not animals. They were not fully human either. They had frog-like faces, long ears, big round eyes that blinked slowly, and dark green skin that shined in the sunlight. Their clothes were made from banana leaves tied around their bodies. Their hands had long nails, and their teeth were sharp like tiny knives. Ngozi froze in fear. Her hands shook, and she dropped her teddy. The creatures began to move closer, making deep growling sounds. Their voices were rough, like the sound of thunder in the distance. She wanted to run, but her legs refused to move. So she did the only thing her little heart could think of. She sat down on the ground, covered her face, and started to cry softly. The creatures stopped. They looked at her, confused. None of them had ever seen a child like this, crying, small and helpless. One of them tilted its head, another sniffed the air, and a third poked the teddy with a stick. They talked in strange sounds. Grr, Toto, Kati. It didn't sound like words, more like frogs singing in low tones. Slowly, one of them touched her arm. She looked up with teary eyes, afraid, but when they saw her tears, they stepped back quietly. They didn't harm her. They seemed to understand she meant no harm. The tallest of them, maybe their leader, waved his hand, and the others slowly circled around her. They didn't smile, but they stopped growling. One of them placed a large leaf with fruits near her feet. Ngozi didn't understand them, but she felt they were offering food. She whispered softly, "Thank you." The creatures watched her eat quietly. When night came, they led her to a small hut made from banana leaves. It was cold and strange, but she was too tired to move. She curled up inside and held her teddy close. Outside, she could hear them talking, croaking and moving in the darkness. Their voices echoed like drums. The forest around her glowed with fireflies, and the moonlight touched the ground softly. Ngozi couldn't sleep. She thought about her parents, her warm bed, and how far she had come. But she also thought about these strange creatures, how they didn't hurt her, even though they could. She whispered to herself, maybe they are not bad, just different. And as the night grew deeper, the little girl from Kaduna closed her eyes, lying in the land of the Katoti, where no human had ever been before. The next morning on the 24th, the forest was full of sounds, birds calling, insects buzzing, and the soft croaking of the Katoti creatures. Ngozi opened her eyes slowly. Sunlight slipped through the banana leaves of the small hut where she had slept. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then she remembered. She wasn't home anymore. When she stepped outside, the Katoti were already awake. Some were carrying long sticks, others were peeling banana leaves or picking fruits. Their movements were quick but gentle. Even though their faces looked scary, they didn't seem angry. One of them, the tall one with a deep voice, pointed to a pile of fruits. Ngozi understood he wanted her to eat. She picked a small one, sniffed it, and took a bite. It tasted sweet, like mango. The Katoti gathered around her, watching curiously. They touched her hair, her clothes, and even her shoes. They had never seen anything like her before. They laughed in their strange, low voices. Gertoto, Kina. Ngozi didn't understand their language, but she smiled shyly. For the first time in many days, she wasn't scared. Later, they took her to the stream nearby. The water was clean and shiny like glass. Small fish jumped around, and the Katoti showed her how they used big leaves to carry water back to their homes. Ngozi tried too, and when her leaf broke, the Katoti laughed, a funny, croaky laugh that made her giggle too. She began to notice something special about them. Even though they looked strange, they lived peacefully together. They shared everything. No one shouted, no one fought. They moved like a family. In the afternoon, they sat around a big flat rock where they placed fruits and nuts. That was their way of eating together. They invited her to sit with them. She didn't understand their words, but she felt their kindness. She said softly, "Thank you," and placed her teddy beside her. The smallest Katoti looked at the teddy and poked it with a stick. When it didn't move, they all laughed again. Ngozi laughed too, holding her stomach. It was the first real laughter she had in a long time. As the day went on, she helped them pick fruits and collect firewood. Even though she didn't know their world, she felt like she belonged there, at least for now. When night came, the Katoti made a small fire that glowed orange under the tall trees. They sat in a circle, singing in their deep, strange voices. Ngozi sat between two of them, her eyes wide open, watching sparks rise into the night sky. She looked up at the stars and whispered, "These people don't fight. They don't even know my language, but they are kind." For the first time, she felt peaceful. No shouting, no phones, no anger. Just the sound of crickets and fire crackling softly. As her eyes grew heavy, the leader of the Katoti placed a big leaf over her to keep her warm. She smiled, closed her eyes and whispered, "Good night, my new friends." Little did she know that while she slept, far away in the house on the hill, her parents had just discovered that she was gone. Back inside the big white house on Bogala Hills, everything was strangely silent. Mr. Otim was in the living room, still on his phone. Liza sat in her room painting her nails, humming softly. They hadn't seen Ngozi for a while, but neither of them thought much about it. Each believed she was in her room, just as the note outside her door said, "Don't disturb me. I want to be alone." Hours passed. The air grew cold. The mountain winds began to blow through the windows. Finally, Mr. Otim looked up from his phone and walked down the hallway and knocked gently on her door. "Ngozi?" No answer. He knocked again, louder this time, still nothing. He frowned, pressed his ear against the door and listened. Silence. He tried to open it, but the door was locked from inside. Now he felt uneasy. "Ngozi!" "It's Daddy! Open the door!" he shouted. Liza heard his voice and came out quickly, annoyed at first. "Why are you shouting again?" she asked sharply. He looked at her and said, "It's Ngozi." She's not answering. They both stared at each other for a moment. Then, for the first time in a long time, they worked together. Mr. Otim kicked the door hard, once, twice, until it burst open. The room was empty. The bed was neatly made, and her teddy bear was gone. On the floor, near the door, lay the small folded note. Liza picked it up with shaking hands. When she read the words, "Don't disturb me. I want to be alone," her heart dropped. "She's gone," she whispered. Mr. Otim's phone fell from his hand. "Gone? What do you mean gone?" They ran through every room, calling her name. "Ngozi! Ngozi!" But only the echo of their voices replied. They rushed outside, to the garden, the kitchen, the backyard, and even the gate. No sign of her. The night had already covered the forest, and the wind howled through the trees. Liza began to cry loudly. "This is our fault. We were too busy fighting, and now she's gone." Her voice broke, and Mr. Otim held his head in his hands. He felt pain deep in his heart. For years he had bought his daughter everything money could buy, but never gave her the one thing she needed, his time. Now the house that once felt big and full felt empty and cold. They called the police station, their voices shaking. The officer on the other end said, "We will send a search team tomorrow morning." It's too dark now tomorrow morning. That meant they had to wait the whole night, not knowing where their little girl was, not knowing if she was safe. That night they didn't fight. They didn't even talk. They just sat together in the living room, both crying silently. Every tick of the wall clock felt like thunder in their hearts. Liza held one of Ngozi's toys close to her chest and whispered, "Please God, bring our daughter back. We will change. I promise." And far away in the forest, under the glowing moon, little Ngozi was sleeping beside the Katoti creatures, safe but unaware that her parents were now crying for her more than they had ever done in their lives. The next morning, on the 25th, the sun rose slowly over Bogala Hills, spreading light across the mountain. The air was cold and misty. At the Otim house, police cars and search teams had already arrived. Men with dogs, torches, and walkie-talkies stood around as Mr. Otim and Liza watched with tired eyes. They hadn't slept the whole night. The police chief, a tall man in a brown jacket, said calmly, "We will search every part of this forest. Don't worry, we will find her." Liza nodded weakly, holding a handkerchief to her eyes. Mr. Otim said nothing. He just stared into the forest, blaming himself silently. The search team began their journey down the mountain. The dogs barked and pulled their handlers toward a narrow trail. Police officers spread out in groups, calling out, "Ngozi! Ngozi Otim, can you hear us?" The sound echoed through the forest. Birds flew off from trees. Leaves rustled in the wind. As they walked, they saw footprints, small ones. The police stopped. One of them bent down and said, "These are a child's footprints." The dogs sniffed the ground and began to bark again. They followed the trail for hours, through thick bushes and muddy paths. The deeper they went, the quieter it became. The air grew heavy and strange sounds echoed in the distance. Then suddenly, one of the officers shouted, "There's something ahead." They slowed down carefully. Between the tall trees, they saw small huts made of banana leaves and branches, strange round shapes they had never seen before. Smoke rose gently from a fire pit, and there, sitting near the fire, was Ngozi. She looked thinner and tired, but she was alive. Around her were the Katoti creatures, standing in silence. Their big eyes blinked slowly as they watched the humans approach. The police raised their torches and pointed their guns, but Mr. Otim shouted, "Wait, don't shoot," and ran forward. The Katoti made deep growling sounds and began stepping back. They didn't attack, they only looked scared. The leader, the tall one, waved his hand, and the others disappeared into the thick forest, leaving Ngozi behind. "Ngozi!" cried Liza, rushing forward. Ngozi turned around slowly. For a second, she couldn't believe it. Then she ran and fell into her mother's arms, crying loudly. Liza held her tight, tears falling on her daughter's face. Mr. Otim knelt beside them and hugged them both, whispering, "My baby. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." The police looked around in amazement, but the strange creatures were gone. Only their footprints remained in the mud. As the sun shone through the trees, the family walked slowly back up the hill, surrounded by the search team. Ngozi held her father's hand tightly this time, afraid to ever let go again. Behind them, deep in the forest, the Katoti watched quietly from the shadows, their eyes glowing softly, as if smiling. And so, the little girl who had run away to find peace was finally going home, not just to her house, but to her family's heart. The sky above Bogala Hills was bright and golden, and the sound of bells from a faraway church echoed softly in the air. Inside the Otim house, everything felt different, calm, peaceful, and warm. Little Ngozi sat on the sofa, wrapped in a thick blanket. Her hair was messy, her face still a bit tired, but her eyes shone with joy. On the table beside her were bowls of hot porridge, bread, and fruit. Liza sat next to her, holding her hand as if she never wanted to let go again. Mr. Otim stood nearby, watching them quietly with teary eyes. For the first time in many years, the house was silent, not because of anger, but because of love. Liza stroked Ngozi's hair gently. "My baby, I'm sorry we made you feel alone," she said softly. Ngozi smiled weakly and replied, "It's okay, Mama. I just wanted us to be happy again." Those words hit deep in Mr. Otim's heart. He came closer, knelt beside his daughter, and said with a shaking voice, "You've taught us something no money could ever teach." Tears rolled down his cheeks. Liza reached out and held his hand. For the first time in so long, they smiled at each other, a real smile, small but full of peace. Later that morning, they all went outside to the balcony. From there, they could see the wide forest below, quiet, green, and full of life. Ngozi looked down and whispered, "Thank you, my friends," remembering the Katoti who had protected her. Mr. Otim placed his hand on her shoulder and said, "You're safe now, Ngozi. And I promise, from today, no more fighting. We'll eat together, talk together, live together." Liza nodded. Yes, family means time, not things that Christmas. There were no gifts wrapped in shiny paper, no big party, no loud music. But it was the happiest Christmas the Otim family had ever known. They sat together, eating and laughing softly. Even the workers in the house smiled because they could feel the peace that had returned. As the evening sun began to fall behind the mountains, Mr. Otim looked at his wife and daughter and said, "This is the real meaning of Christmas, finding love again." And little Ngozi leaned her head on her mother's shoulder and whispered, "It was a scary journey, but now I know family is the best place in the world." The camera of life moved away slowly from the shining house on the hill where 3 hearts had been broken and healed again. That day, they didn't just celebrate Christmas. They celebrated a new beginning, a blessing called family reunion. No amount of money can replace love, peace, and time with the people you care about. A gentle word and a listening ear are worth more than all the gold in the world. Always make time for your family. Love deeply. Speak kindly. And never let anger take the place of peace. Like, share, comment, and subscribe to hear more life-changing African stories.